I woke up with the mother of all hangovers, with my head pounding like a jackhammer and my mouth feeling as if I'd been stuffed with cotton. I squinted against the piercing ray of sun that decided this was the morning to be shining the brightest. Slowly, I got up, balancing my heavy head in my hands, hoping the throbbing pain would ease if I just gave it a minute, then looked around. Nope, I definitely did not recognize the room. Things got even weirder when I noticed someone stirring beside me. Panic shot through me as I turned to see the most beautiful man I'd ever laid eyes on, fast asleep next to me. His black hair were tasseled all over the pillow. His long, beautiful lashes, his relaxed face, and breathing made me not only skip a beat, but forget that I wasn't in heaven surrounded by beautiful angels, but in a hotel in Las Vegas. Shit, I was in Vegas. What the hell did I do to this man? More importantly, who even was he? And a million other questions rushed through my head as I hurried to get out of there. I stumbled out of bed, grabbed my clothes off the floor, and threw them on, feeling like a circus clown in a state of disarray. Before leaving, I glanced over at the sleeping guy, then at the bedside table where I spotted a few bucks and change lying, and it hit me like a brick. Dear Lord, I invited the service last night. How could I? Cursing myself, but not loud enough to wake him up. I placed a stack of bills on the bedside, hoping it would be enough to cover whatever services he provided, and run like hell. About 20 minutes later, muttering only God knows what, I stumbled into the hotel's breakfast area, my head still throbbing like a bass drum. The bright lights and the clatter of dishes only made things worse. I was on a desperate hunt for lemons or anything that might help with this hangover. I had barely grabbed a coffee when my search for food was cut short by a familiar voice. Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? I turned around and there he was, the guy from the room. He looked annoyed, the relaxation on his face long gone, his face flushed with anger. Seriously? I muttered, rubbing my temples. Can't a guy just get some peace and quiet to recover from a bad night? You think you can just leave like that? He demanded, his eyes burning with a mix of frustration and disbelief. Who do you think I am? At first, I assumed he was mad because I hadn't left him enough money. My brain wasn't actually functioning at its best, so I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handful of cash. Look, I'm really sorry if I shortchanged you. Here, take more. Just don't make a scene. He looked at the money as if it was a piece of garbage. I don't want your money, you idiot, he snapped. Then what? Don't what me. You tell me what we are going to do now that I'm your husband, he spat. I stared at him, completely bewildered. My what? He lifted his hand and I saw it. There was a wedding ring on his finger. My eyes darted to my own hand, and to my shock, I saw a matching ring on my finger. No way, I whispered, shaking my head in disbelief. This has to be a joke. I don't remember marrying you. It's not a joke, he said, crossing his arms and glaring at me. We're actually married, and you don't even remember it? I felt my heart race, a mix of panic and embarrassment wash over me. No, I don't. I can't remember a damn thing from last night. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. We were both pretty drunk. We met at a bar, and you were upset about your ex. You started talking about how you were ready to get married to anyone just to prove a point. I winced at the memory. Oh God, I was pretty messed up. I remember talking about my ex, but marriage? Really? Yeah, really, he said, his voice softer now, but still laced with frustration. You insisted that we get married. I tried to talk you out of it, but you wouldn't listen. Next thing I knew, we were at a wedding chapel and we were married. I rubbed my face with my hands, feeling the weight of the situation crash down on me. I can't believe this, was all that left my lips as I cursed myself for ever coming to Vegas. 3 days ago. Wow, August, this looks amazing, Justin said as he entered the door and took the view of our apartment in. You really went all out. Of course, I replied with a smile. It's our 10th anniversary. I wanted it to be special. Honey, you didn't need to do so much. It's been 10 years. I hardly see the point in celebrating it, he chuckled. I knew Justin didn't like anything grand or anything that puts labels on things, but a 10-year anniversary was a big deal for me. It was only for him that I decided to keep it casual, something small at home, just us, a movie, and dinner. So, I said as we sipped on some wine after dinner, relaxed on the couch. Now that we've hit this milestone, I was thinking we should talk about where we're headed. I mean, 10 years is a long time, right? Justin looked a bit taken aback, but tried to play it cool. Yeah, sure. What do you want to talk about? Well, I began, trying to keep my tone casual, but feeling a bit anxious. I've been thinking about our future. You know, marriage, kids, all that stuff. We've been together for so long, and I feel like it's time we start thinking about it seriously. He shifted in his seat, looking a bit uncomfortable. Yeah, of course. But don't you think this is okay too? I mean, I'm happy with how things are. I could feel my heart sink a little. What do you mean? We've been together for 10 years and yet you have no plans for our future? He sighed and looked down at his glass. I don't want to rush into something I'm not ready for. I felt my face flush with anger. Rush? We've been together for 10 years. If this isn't the right time, then when will it be? He looked at me, his expression a mix of frustration and resignation. August, this isn't about rushing. It's about being sure and ready. I could feel my patience wearing thin. You are still not sure about me, after all this time. Justin's face hardened. I'm not saying I don't want a future with you. I'm saying I need more time to figure out what that future looks like. At this point, my emotions were all over the place. More time? You've had 10 years. I need to know if this relationship is leading somewhere or if we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. He stood up abruptly, his frustration now evident. August, this is exactly why I didn't want to have this conversation. You're putting too much pressure on me. Pressure? I shot back, standing up too. You're the one who's been dragging your feet. I'm just trying to understand where we stand. His face was flushed with anger. I'm not ready for this. I need space. Maybe we should just take a break. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. A break? You think taking a break is going to solve anything? I don't know, he said, his voice wavering. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, and I tried to blink them away. So that's it? After 10 years, you just want to take a break? I think it's for the best, Justin said, sounding distant. The finality in his voice was crushing. Fine, if you need space, then take it, but don't expect me to just sit around waiting forever. He looked at me with a blank expression. I never asked you to wait. I thought that much was always clear. And with that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone. The silence was deafening, and why wouldn't it be? It rang with the tune of a broken relationship, loud and clear. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, going through the motions but not really feeling present. I was hurt, sad, and above all angry and conscious. What was I lacking for him to not want to commit? So the first stupid thing that came to my head, I packed a bag and boarded the first flight to Vegas. 2 days ago. Vegas was a bad idea. What made me think it was a good idea? I never liked crowds, dancing under 1,000 twinkling lights to something that can only be called noise. I hate crowds. Why was I here? I could only curse myself as I felt my head falling down on the table because of all the booze. I had to look like I belonged. Another bad idea. Mind if I join you? Came a smooth voice, making me jerk my head up. Took a few seconds to take his face in. I saw a pair of beautiful black eyes. Then came his equally dark hair and a smile that was in contrast to both. Maybe Vegas wasn't that bad of an idea. I blinked, bringing me back from my wishful thinking. Sure, I guess. He slid into the seat next to me, his presence immediately making the space feel a bit warmer. I'm Colin, he said, extending his hand. I shook his hand, feeling a bit awkward. August, nice to meet you. We fell into an easy conversation, and I can tell he was genuinely interested. I found myself opening up more than I usually would. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, or maybe I just needed to spill my guts to someone who didn't know me. So, what's got you brooding over here all alone? Colin asked, leaning in a little. I sighed, taking a gulp of my drink. It's a long story, just had a rough night. My boyfriend and I, we broke up. His eyebrows shot up. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. That must be tough. Though his smirk didn't look nearly as sorry. It is, I admitted, feeling at the sting of fresh pain. We were together for 10 years. Thought we'd be going places, you know? But he wasn't ready for commitment. After all that time, he just wasn't sure. Colin's expression softened, and he gave me a sympathetic smile. That sounds rough. Sometimes people just don't realize what they have until it's gone. Yeah, I said, bitterness creeping into my voice. I mean, how do you spend a decade with someone and still be unsure about the future? It's like, what was I to him, a placeholder? Colin nodded, taking in my rant with patience. It was nice to be able to rant about Justin out loud. I don't even remember when the ranting turned into a full-on swear Justin with all you got competition. We chatted more as the night went on, and the more we talked, the more I found myself warming to Colin. He had this way of making me feel like I wasn't completely crazy for feeling the way I did. We talked about our lives, and I learned that he was also from the city. What a coincidence. I realized that we had quite a bit in common. We both loved the same local music scene and had a taste for the same types of food. and even enjoyed the same quirky little spots around town. It felt good to connect with someone so easily, especially after the mess I'd been through. As the night wore on, Colin suggested we hit up some of the games and activities around the bar. I was game for anything that could take my mind off the breakup. We played pool, laughed over our terrible shots, and even tried our hands at a few other games. Each time I looked over at Colin, he had this infectious energy that made me forget, at least for a while, how much I was hurting. We moved on to dancing, and despite my initial reluctance, Colin convinced me to hit the floor. The music was loud and the crowd was lively. We danced, joked around, and just let loose. I could feel the weight of my worries lifting, even if just a little. As the night drew to a close, we found ourselves back at the bar, a little drunker and a lot more carefree. Colin looked at me with a mischievous grin. "You know, we make a pretty good team. Who knew we'd end up having so much fun together?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in days. "Yeah, I guess so. Thanks for making this night a lot better." He leaned in, his voice low. "Anytime. It's been great hanging out with you, August." We exchanged numbers and said our goodbyes, both of us knowing that this night had been a welcome distraction from the chaos of our lives. As I walked out of the bar, I knew my reality was far from this. Yet, I was happy to have laughed so much. Later that night, I guess the universe didn't like me happy. I mean, why else would it put such a stupid idea into my head? Here, I was simply trying to find my way back to my hotel room, but the alcohol had hit me hard. Yes, I blamed the alcohol, so I pulled out my phone feeling the need to reach out and dialed his number. I expected the call to go straight to voicemail, but someone answered. It wasn't Justin's voice on the other end. "Hello," the voice said, sounding a bit confused. "Hey, where's Justin?" I asked, my frustration growing. "I need to talk to him." "He's in the shower right now," the person replied. "Can I take a message?" I felt a surge of irritation. "Yes, tell him August called to say fuck off," and hung up. I sat where I was, which I, of course, don't remember where, and cried. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. It was clear that Justin wasn't interested in talking to me and was apparently having a fun time with whoever the hell it was on call, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I found myself back at the bar and my gaze fell on Colin. He was still there, chatting with a few people, and I felt a sudden urge to seek out some more distractions. I wobbled over to him and plopped down beside him. "Hey, Colin," I said, trying to sound casual, but probably failing miserably. "I think we should hang out a bit more. I'm not ready to call it a night yet." Colin looked at me with a mix of curiosity and amusement. "Sure, why not? We can find something else to do." We ended up hitting a few more bars and drinking even more. By now, everything was starting to blur together. We laughed, stumbled through conversations, and tried out different games. He made me forget everything, even if just for a little while. At some point, we decided to explore a rooftop view of the city. Colin led the way and I followed. The fresh air was a nice change from the crowded bars, and the city lights stretched out below us like a sea of stars. We sat down on the roof and I leaned back, feeling the cool breeze against my face. I was slumped against Colin, my words starting to slur as the alcohol took its toll. "You know," I said, staring at the skyline, "I don't get it. What the hell was he thinking? It's like he thought I'd just sit around forever waiting for him to figure things out. I mean, what does he think? That I can't find anyone else?" I said, my voice dripping with bitterness. I paused, looking at Colin with a goofy grin. "I mean, I can get married to anyone I want, so what if I don't have him? I've got you." Colin raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my drunken proclamation. "Is that so?" "Yeah," I said, my words coming out in a jumbled mess. "You're great. I like hanging out with you. And you know what? I don't want to be alone tonight, or ever again. If that rat bastard can move on, well, so can I." Colin chuckled softly, clearly enjoying the absurdity of the situation. "Okay, so what are you thinking?" I looked around the rooftop, the city lights flickering in the distance, and suddenly a wild idea hit me. I sat up, looking Colin square in the eyes. "Let's get married." Colin's eyes widened in surprise. "What?" "Yeah," I said, giggling a bit. "Let's do it. We can get married. It'll be fun and crazy, and I don't know, just what I need right now." Colin laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," I said, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "Let's do it. I'm serious." He looked at me, probably trying to gauge how serious I was, but the mix of alcohol and emotions made it hard for me or him to see clearly. "You know, this is a really crazy idea." "I know," I said with a grin. Colin stared at me for a moment, his expression a mix of amusement and concern. "All right, let's see if we can make this night even more memorable." And with that, we decided to set on a hunt for a wedding chapel. About an hour later that night. If only someone had stopped us that night. Drunk, stumbling from here and there, we reached a small place that looked like it had been pulled straight out of a postcard from the 70s. The Chapel of Love sign was lit up in bright flashing lights, and it felt like the perfect place for our impulsive decision. Colin pushed open the chapel doors with a dramatic flourish, and we both staggered inside, trying to look as composed as possible. The inside was decorated with an overwhelming amount of fake flowers, tacky velvet curtains, and a bright red carpet leading up to the altar. It was exactly the kind of place we'd hoped to find for this off-the-wall decision. "Welcome," the officiant, an older man with a cheery smile and a bow tie, greeted us. He looked us up and down and probably wondering what kind of wild night we'd been having. "Are you here for a wedding?" "Yes," I shouted, trying to steady myself. "We want to get married." We wobbled down the red carpet to the altar, giggling and whispering to each other. Colin had his arm around my shoulders, and I was clinging to him for support. We took our places at the altar, and the officiant began to go through the formalities. "So," the officiant started, "do you have your vows prepared?" Colin and I exchanged a look and burst into laughter. "Vows?" Colin asked, barely containing his giggles. "Do we need those?" No," I said, still laughing. "We'll just wing it." The officiant gave us a bemused look, but seemed okay with the plan. "All right then, let's get started." As the officiant began the ceremony, Colin and I tried to pay attention, but the alcohol had left us in a state of barely contained hilarity. Every time the officiant spoke, we would snicker and exchanged amused glances. "Now, if you could exchange rings," the officiant continued, holding out a small velvet box, "and say your vows." "I'll go first," I said, grabbing the rings and nearly dropping them. Justin's such a jerk. I mean, seriously, who does that after 10 years? Colin took the ring from me, trying to stay composed but failing. "Yeah, Justin's a real piece of work. I'm glad you're marrying me instead. This is way more fun." We managed to fumble through the ring exchange, both of us barely able to keep our balance as we slid the rings onto each other's fingers. The officiant seemed to be struggling to maintain a straight face, but he kept his composure. "Do you, August, take Colin to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the officiant said. "I do," I shouted, but then I paused and added with a grin, "as long as he doesn't turn out like Justin." Colin burst into laughter, and the officiant looked a bit puzzled but carried on. "And do you, Colin, take August to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Colin said, trying to control his laughter. "And if he ever mentions his ex again, I'll kick his ass before kissing him like this." And with that, he put his lips on my lips, and I tasted the red stuff he'd been drinking all night. "And now, by the power vested in me," he said, sounding a bit amused, "I pronounce you husband and husband. You may kiss the groom," said the officiant. Well, because he had to. "Yum," I said as our lips pulled apart. We both laughed, our voices echoing off the chapel walls. As we finally quieted down, we saw the officiant trying to hide a smile. "Congratulations, you two. You're officially married." "Cheers to that," Colin said, raising his drink in a toast, "to a crazy night and a new husband." Back to the present day. "Did we really get married?" I asked, rubbing my temples. "I mean, that actually happened, right?" We both stared at our matching rings, which now felt like an absurd reminder of the night's events. It was surreal, but also kind of funny. At the same time, the weight of what we had done started to sink in. We were married, but we barely knew each other, and neither of us had planned for this. "So what now?" I asked, looking at Colin. "Do we just, wake up tomorrow and act like this didn't happen?" Colin shook his head. "I don't think that's really an option. We need to figure out what to do next." We spent the rest of the day trying to piece together the events of the evening and trying to make sense of everything. The more we talked, the more we realized that we needed to handle this properly. Neither of us wanted to be stuck in a marriage we hadn't planned for, but we also didn't want to make hasty decisions. By evening, we both felt that we'd been hit by a truck. The hangover was brutal, and we were too tired from whatever we did. So finally, we decided to return back home and then see what to do next. Once we were back in town, Colin pulled out his phone. "I have a few lawyers in my contact list who might be able to help us with this," he said. "I'll give them a call and see what our options are, and contact you." I nodded, feeling a bit overwhelmed but also relieved that Colin was taking charge. "Thanks, I really don't know where to start with this." A few days later. A few days after the crazy night, Colin called me. I could tell by the way he said my name that he had some news. "Hey, August, can you meet me at the cafe down the street? I've got an update on the annulment situation." I agreed and headed over to the cafe, feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. When I walked in, Colin was already there, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up and waved as I approached. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "So what's the news?" Colin took a sip of his coffee and set the cup down. "All right, I spoke with the lawyer. The good news is that we can get the marriage annulled under the clause want of understanding or something." I let out a sigh of relief. "That's great. How long is this going to take?" "It might take up to 4 weeks," Colin replied. 4 weeks, huh? I said, trying to lighten the mood. Looks like you're stuck with me as your husband for a little while longer. Colin chuckled and shook his head. Yeah, guess so. Pretty happy to be stuck with you. I raised an eyebrow, half expecting him to be serious, but he just smiled and shrugged. Well, I'm mostly just joking, but honestly, we've had a pretty wild adventure together. It's been interesting. I laughed, feeling a bit more at ease. Yeah, interesting is definitely one way to put it. I'm just glad we're figuring this out together. Same here, Colin said, leaning back in his chair. We chatted a bit more about the details of the annulment process and what steps we needed to take next. Despite the strange circumstances, it felt good to talk with someone who understands and wants to listen to you. I don't ever remember having such a conversation with Justin, ever. A few days later, it had been over a week since the whole marriage fiasco, and Colin and I started to spend more time together. It felt like we moved past the awkwardness and were starting to build a genuine friendship. One Saturday morning, we decided to grab coffee at a local cafe that Colin had been raving about. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls lined with local art. We found a table near the window and settled in with our drinks. So, Colin said, taking a sip of his latte, I have to ask, what's the story behind your favorite coffee order? I chuckled, stirring my black coffee. It's nothing special, really. He used to drink it, so I stuck with it too. Your ex? Colin asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I said, rolling my eyes. Colin nodded, his eyes deep in thought. You know you can drink anything you like now, right? With that, he pulled my coffee away from me and handed me the menu. I know, but no buts. It's high time you start living as per your likes. Well, in this case, drink as per your likes, he chuckled. It took me a while, but I ended up ordering a white chocolate mocha, and it was an absolute best. Thank you for making me do this, I said, happier than I expected me to be. Anytime, he smiled. We continued chatting, talking about everything from our favorite movies to childhood memories. The more we talked, the more I realized how easy it was to be around Colin. He had this way of making everything feel relaxed and natural. By the end of our coffee date, I felt a lot more connected to him. We laughed about some silly things and planned to meet up again soon. It was nice to have someone who genuinely cared and was easy to be around. Over a few weeks later, Colin suggested we visit an art gallery he had been meaning to check out. I was up for it, curious to see what kind of art he was interested in. We made our way to the gallery one Saturday afternoon, excited to explore. The gallery was filled with modern art pieces ranging from abstract sculptures to vibrant paintings. Colin and I wandered through the exhibits, taking in the various works and discussing our impressions when a single painting caught both our eyes. It was a simple piece, 2 different hands connected by a single red thread that looped and twisted around them, delicate yet unbreakable. The hands didn't touch, but the thread seemed to pull them closer, almost like they were destined to meet. Colin came to stand beside me. That's beautiful, he said softly, his voice pulling me out of my thoughts. Do you know the story behind the red thread? I nodded. The invisible string theory, right? The idea that we're all connected to someone by a red thread no matter the time, place, or circumstances? Exactly, Colin said, a small smile playing on his lips. The thread may stretch or tangle, but it can never break. It's supposed to mean that no matter what happens, you're destined to meet that person. I studied the painting a little closer. The hands were different, one slender and delicate, the other strong and larger. They didn't match perfectly, yet the thread bound them together. Do you believe in it? I asked, turning to Colin. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept his gaze on the painting, his eyes thoughtful. I think I do, he finally said. I like the idea that there's someone out there who's meant for you, and when you find them, it just clicks. Everything makes sense. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. It was more than just the warmth of friendship. There was something deeper, a kind of sincerity that made my chest tighten. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I don't know, I started, breaking the silence. I'm not sure I believe that there's just one person out there for everyone. What if it's more about choosing someone? Deciding that they're the one you want to be with and committing to them no matter what? Colin turned to me then, his eyes locking into mine. You don't think there's someone you're meant to be with? I shrugged, feeling a little defensive. I think it's less about fate and more about effort. You find someone, you love them, and you work to make it last. That's what matters, not some invisible string. He was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if I'd said something wrong, but then he smiled a small, understanding smile. Maybe you're right, he said, though his tone suggested he didn't fully agree. But I still think there's something to the idea of destiny. Like, some people just come into your life at the right time and you can't explain it. I wanted to argue but couldn't. Maybe because part of me wanted to believe him. wanted to think that there was someone out there who would make everything make sense. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt before, was scared to let go of the idea that love was something you had to work at, not something that was handed to you by fate. A few days later, it was a lazy Sunday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I was on my back, lying in loose clothes, texting Colin happily when it rang. It was weird as I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and found Justin standing there, looking a little disheveled but determined. My heart skipped a beat and I wasn't sure if I was more surprised or annoyed. "Justin," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me with a mix of sadness and desperation. "August, can we talk? I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking a lot. I miss you, and I want to try again." I hesitated, the memories of our breakup flooding back. "You miss me? After everything that happened?" "I do," he said earnestly. "I realize now that I messed up. I've had time to think about what I want, and I want to be with you. I know I wasn't ready for commitment before, but I've changed, I promise." I looked at him, feeling a rush of conflicting emotions. "You've changed? Just like that?" "August, please," he said, his voice pleading. "Give me a chance to prove it. I know I've hurt you, but I really want to make things right." I wanted to believe him. A part of me missed the comfort of our old relationship, despite how toxic it had become. I let Justin inside and we sat down in the living room. "So what's changed?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "What makes you think we can make this work now?" Justin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been seeing a therapist. I realized that I was holding back my own issues. I'm ready to commit now. I know I should have been this way before, but I want to be better." He spoke with a sincerity that almost convinced me. We talked for hours, reminiscing about our good times and discussing what went wrong. By the end of the conversation, I was torn. A part of me wanted to give it another shot, while another part was skeptical about the sincerity of his promises. As Justin left, he hugged me tightly. "Please think about it, August. I really want this to work." I stood at the door watching him walk away, feeling confused and conflicted. It was clear that my emotions were all over the place, and I knew I needed to talk to someone who could give me a clearer perspective. Later that evening, "He's back and he wants to get back together. He says he's changed and is ready for commitment now." Colin looked thoughtful for a moment before responding. "I can see why you'd be conflicted, but from what you have told me, Justin's patterns don't exactly scream change. People don't usually change overnight, especially when it comes to fundamental issues like commitment." "I know," I said, sighing, "but he seems so genuine today. It's like he really wants to make things right. What if he has changed?" Colin shook his head. "August, you know how many times we've had this conversation, and each time I simply tell you that people just don't change." I felt defensive, the old arguments and pain resurfacing. "But he's trying, Colin. Doesn't that count for something?" Colin's expression softened, but he was firm. "It does count for something, but it doesn't mean you should jump back into a relationship that was unhealthy before. You deserve more than empty promises, and if you decide to go back, you're setting yourself up for more disappointment." "Easy for you to say," I snapped. "You don't know what it's like to be with someone for 10 years and then have them come back and say they've changed. I don't want to just throw that away." Colin's face grew serious. "I get that, August, but think about how many times you've been hurt by him. Do you really want to risk going through that again? It's not just about what he says, it's about what he's done and whether those patterns are truly changing." We sat in silence for a moment. I was torn between wanting to believe in Justin's change and the reality that Colin was probably right. I was losing my head and Colin wasn't helping much. Finally, Colin broke the silence. "Look, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I care about you, and I don't want to see you get hurt again." "Why are you so set on thinking that I will end up getting hurt?" I asked angrily. "Because you can't see that for yourself," he too replied angrily. "Well, I don't need you to think for me," I spat and left. A week later. It had been a few weeks since I'd gotten back with Justin. Things seemed to be going well. He was making an effort, showing up on time, being attentive, and even talking about plans for the future. It was like I had the old Justin back, but with a new layer of commitment. I tried to stay positive and hopeful, but there was this gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach that wouldn't go away. We spent the evening cooking dinner together. It was one of those peaceful nights where everything felt normal. Justin had put on some old jazz records, and we were both humming along while chopping vegetables and stirring pots. I should have been content, but I couldn't shake off the emptiness that lingered. Justin caught me staring off into space. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice soft in concern. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about some stuff." He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and worry. "Anything you want to talk about?" I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't want to share, but it felt hard to explain something that didn't seem to make sense. "Nah, it's nothing important." Justin put his hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me. August, you've been through a lot. It's okay to be messed up in the head some days, and chuckled. I nodded, but his words didn't quite reach the part of me that was aching. We finished dinner, and as we cleaned up, my mind kept drifting to Colin. The way he used to look at me, the way he made me laugh, the way I felt safe and understood around him. It was all still so vivid. I missed him so much that it almost hurt physically. Once Justin left, I sat alone on the couch feeling the weight of my own emotions pressing down on me. I missed Colin so much that it hurt, but why? Why did the idea of living without him, of not having him in my life at all terrify me? I picked up my phone and stared at it, wondering if I should reach out, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt too complicated, and I didn't know how to start the conversation. Moreover, he hadn't called me since our last conversation. Maybe I had hurt him a lot, and the last thing I wanted was to make things worse. 5 days later. It was one of those early afternoons that feels perfect to go home early and nap with your loved ones. I'd gotten off work early feeling hopeful that maybe today would be a good day, but as soon as I opened the door to my apartment, that sense of hope was shattered. The door swung open and I was met with a scene I'd hoped I'd never have to see again. Justin was in bed, but he wasn't alone. There was another man beside him, their bodies tangled together. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there frozen for a moment, not fully processing what I was seeing. The anger and betrayal took over. I slammed the door shut and shouted, "What the hell?" My heart was racing as I stumbled backward, my mind a jumbled mess. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing that felt right at the moment. I ran. I needed to get out of there, away from the pain and confusion. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Colin. My breath came in ragged gasps as I tried to steady myself. "Colin, it's August," I said when he picked up. "I need you. Can you meet me outside my apartment, please?" I barely waited for his response before hanging up and hurrying down the street. My chest felt like it was going to explode, and I was desperate to find some solace. Luckily, Colin was close by, and he arrived within minutes. He looked concerned as he saw me standing there, tears streaming down my face. Without saying a word, I threw myself into his arms. "Colin, you were right. Justin, he's cheating on me. I saw him in bed with another guy. I don't know what to do." Colin held me tight, his arms a comforting presence amidst the chaos. "I'm sorry, August. I know this must be really hard." As I started to calm down a bit, Colin gently pushed me back so he could look at me. "Listen, August," he said, his voice firm but kind. "I told you before that Justin probably wouldn't change. I want to help, but you need to understand that you can't keep turning to me every time Justin lets you down." His words stung, but I knew he was right. It was just hard to hear it all over again. I was so caught up in my own emotions that I didn't even notice Justin storming out of the apartment until he was right there, his face flushed with anger. "August!" Justin shouted. "What's going on? Who's this guy?" He tried to pull me away from Colin, his hands grabbing at my arms. "Come back inside, we need to talk." I pulled away, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. "No, Justin, I don't want to listen to anything you have to say. I'm not going back inside with you." Justin's face grew more menacing as he shouted, "Stop making a scene." He reached out again, trying to force me back toward the apartment as I struggled with his grip. "Get your hands off my husband," came Colin's voice from behind. "Husband? Like anyone would want him," Justin said, sniggering towards me. Colin stepped between us, his posture rigid and protective. "I don't care what you think." I said, "Leave my husband alone. August is not going back inside with you. If you don't back off, I'll call the police." Justin's eyes widened, and he seemed to hesitate for a moment. Colin's threat had made him realize that maybe he had pushed too far. "You can't do this," Justin shouted, but he backed away slowly, glaring at me with a mix of anger and regret. "Don't come back here," Colin said, his voice low and dangerous. "If you do, I'll make sure the police know exactly what's happening." With a final venomous look, Justin turned and stormed off. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and lingering hurt. The situation had left me feeling raw and exposed, and as soon as he was out of sight, I turned back to Colin. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling as I stepped closer to him. "I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't mean to put you through this." Colin's expression softened, but he looked exhausted. "You don't have to apologize, August. I'm just glad you called me. I hate seeing you like this." I looked up at him, my eyes filled with tears. "I know I've messed things up, but is there any chance you might give me another shot? I need you in my life, Colin. I really do." Colin took a deep breath, clearly weighing his words. "I care about you a lot, August, but I need to know that you're not just using me as a safety net whenever things go wrong with Justin. If we're going to make this work, I need to know that you're in it for the right reasons and that you won't run away when things get tough." I nodded, feeling a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. I understand. I promise I won't run away again. I just want to be with you. I'm tired of the confusion and the hurt. I want something real, something that feels right, something that just clicks. Colin's eyes softened with a mixture of relief and affection. All right, August, and pulled me into a hug. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was where I belonged, to be home. It was clear that there was still a lot to work through, but for now, I was grateful to have Colin by my side again. A week later. A couple of days after the drama with Justin, I was feeling more grounded. Colin and I were trying to get back to a place where things felt good between us, and I was trying to take things one step at a time. One of the things still on my mind was the annulment. I figured it was time to deal with it, so I called Colin to ask about it. I found Colin at a coffee shop we both liked. The mismatched furniture and the quirky decorations remind us of the way we started, messily. Colin was already there when I arrived, seated at a small table by the window. When he saw me, he smiled and waved me over. I slid into the chair opposite him, and he pushed a cup of steaming coffee toward me. I took a sip and let out a satisfied sigh. So about the annulment, I started trying to sound casual. Have you had a chance to look into it? Colin's expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. Yeah, I have. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. My heart skipped a beat. Oh? What's up? He hesitated for a moment, then finally looked up at me. Well, I never actually filed for the annulment. I blinked, trying to process what he had said. What? You didn't? But why not? Colin took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. Please don't be mad. It's just I never planned on letting you go. From the moment I saw you in the bar looking sloppingly pretty, I had decided to win you over. I stared at him, a bit stunned. From the very start? He nodded, a hint of a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, from the very start. You just came into my life and everything clicked. I couldn't help but rush and put my lips right on my man's lips. Conclusion. I still don't believe in his string theory, but I can't deny that everything in my life has clicked since I met Colin. Maybe it was the conversation in the museum that changed things between us, or maybe it was right in Vegas where he changed my life, but I'm still gonna stick to my theory. And now that I realize that Colin was the person I wanted to choose, the one I wanted to love with all my heart, I'm never letting him go. And that's what I did. We never filed for an annulment. Instead, we decided to stay married and see where life would take us. The end. Do you believe there's someone out there for everyone? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.